with the moon landing, any of that stuff, I guess it's feasible, that there's more people involved, that the whole moon landing thing was fake. Yeah, that's feasible on, Hollywood levels, right? But QAnon is detached.
The power of our democracy.
The whole flat earth phenomenon, it was fairly low key and then hit a spike fairly recently. And even a well-known basketball player, Kyrie Irving, I'm not sure if you're familiar, he was a huge advocate, and then apparently came out of the rabbit hole and said, no, I got sucked in. And apparently the people who got through to him were elementary school teachers saying, how are we going to teach these kids with a globe when they want to look at a frisbee?
Yeah.
Right. So he did a little more research, and I guess he got himself out. Should we be using people like Kyrie Irving as spokespeople to basically say, it happened to me, it can happen to anybody? Like, would he be a good PSA person?
Yeah, I think so, because anybody who's held a belief and then has figured out that the belief is wrong has a very good perspective, because they understand how easy it was for them to get sucked in. They understand the seductiveness of those ideas, and then they also understand just how wrong they are and how hypocritical the people within the community are. Google and YouTube did a thing a few years ago, probably still going, called the Redirection Project. It's part of their Jigsaw subdivision, which is encountering disinformation, and it was aimed at young jihadists, and people would search for jihadist-themed videos on YouTube back when they had that type of content. And what they would do is they would, show them whatever the search results were, but then put in the, playing next thing in the sidebar, a video by someone who was a former jihadist. And then this former jihadist would simply talk about what his experience was being a jihadist, and how it was not what they expected, and how the other people weren't very holy people, and how they eventually came to realize that what they were doing was wrong, and how they talked to their imams about it, things like that, stuff that was valuable perspective. And so I think that talking to former believers, actually having former believers to talk to someone is a very valuable tool.
Yeah, you'd mentioned that in the book. A number of people you've helped out of the rabbit hole are now doing it themselves. Are there any plans in the works for a network, any way in which we could draw upon their expertise now to help others?
It's usually a fairly small number, unfortunately. Most people who come out of the rabbit hole kind of just essentially fade back into normal life, or part way into normal life. They still maintain some conspiratorial beliefs, but not as much as before. The kind of evangelical former believer is much more the exception than the rule. And I can't really gather a group of them together, but I think it certainly is useful. And in some of the bigger theories that have affected more people, there are groups of former believers. With QAnon, there's Reddit groups for both people who used to be believers in the QAnon conspiracy theory, and also support groups for relatives, like QAnon Anonymous, which is people who they've had relatives who were believers or are believers.
Right.
So like these types of communities, I think, are things that we should encourage. Things that can be useful resources.
And why, like, of all the conspiracy theories that I've studied, QAnon on paper shouldn't work.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's just so detached from reality. Like with JFK's assassination, with the moon landing, any of that stuff, I guess it's feasible, that there's more people involved, that the whole moon landing thing was fake. Yeah, that's feasible on, Hollywood levels, right? But QAnon is detached from reality and is somewhat metaphysical. It's involving like Satan, right? Like people worshiping, and it's satanic, it's otherworldly. And is this one of the first times in history we've had, I mean, outside of the Jewish cabals back in the medieval times, what's going on here? Why are people, how can people believe that?
Well, it's kind of two things in a way. I mean, you touched on one of them outside of the Jewish cabals type thing, but that is a thread that has been running through conspiracy theories since the dawn of I don't know of civilization. That this group of others, which is conveniently the Jewish people, has been the scapegoats for conspiracy beliefs. You know, back in the time of the Black Death, people were looking for people to blame for this plague, and they picked the Jews, and then they gathered up Jewish people, put them in houses, and burnt the house down, thinking that would help. But yeah, this is just the latest manifestation of basically anti-Semitic conspiracy theories. But QAnon also is a product of where we are as a society and a technological society. It's kind of a product of a rapid feedback loop that we have with social media that has allowed conspiracy theories to evolve more rapidly because they get more rapid feedback. And it's become a kind of uber conspiracy, a conspiracy theory that encompasses all the other conspiracy theories and seeks to essentially explain the whole world. And it gives it this background framework of satanic cabal, but in some ways that's not almost that important. It's more that there is this shadowy otherness, but it has a quality of being what's been described as self-sealing. Like if someone points out that there's something wrong with it, they say, "Oh, look, Q said that Hillary Clinton was going to be arrested in 2019, and then she wasn't." Then that doesn't invalidate the conspiracy theory because they just simply explain why that happened. They say, "Oh, well, yeah, that had to happen that way because of where we are now." So if you look at where we are now, it's explained by everything in the past. It's the simplest way of describing what they do, but they throw in a bunch more convolutions, of course. But it's a theory that has evolved properties that make it ideal for being propagated and being maintained. You can think of any conspiracy theory as being a kind of a meme, like a mental virus, and it has to have certain phenotype expressions. Not in a virus, but there's certain things that it does that are beneficial to its propagation. And if there are lots of conspiracy theories that you don't hear about because they were terrible, they weren't very good conspiracy theories, and they died out. Someone like some of the school shooting things that no one really believed them very much. They existed for a while, but they didn't really last. But then others are much more long-lived, like the JFK conspiracy theories and various stripes. 9/11's conspiracy theory is kind of dying out. But QAnon is a very dynamic one. It's constantly evolving, and that makes it very difficult to address. And you can have a very hard time talking to people who are believers in QAnon.